One is opposite the other. Just like in the previous Perek, we had Tzadik v'Rale and Tzadik v'Tevle. Tzadik who still has evil in him, B'dakas. And Tzadik v'Tevle means a perfect Tzadik, which the Rebbe called B'nei Aliyah, according to the translation of B'nei Aliyah. The same is true in Tzadik in Russia also. There's two Madreges in Russia. Now, let me give you the Nekud of this Perek, okay? The Nekud of this Perek is, to be called the Rosh v'Tevle requires two things. You have to have Avedis, and you have to feel bad about it. Called Charata, that's it. If you have Avedis and Charata, you're a Rosh v'Tevle. It could be one Aveda and lots of Charata. It could be many Avedas and a little Charata. If you conform to both of those rules, you are a Rosh v'Tevle. Now, if you have no Avedas, you're a Beinin. If you have no Charata, if you have no regret, that's a Rosh v'Tevle. If you have no Jewish guilt, you have no sentiment of the evil of a sin, that's a Rosh v'Tevle. So the criteria of Rosh v'Tevle is that you have Ra. Doesn't matter how much, it could be even a small amount. In other words, Beinin also has a Ra. Even Tzadik v'Rale has plenty of Ra. But in a Tzadik v'Rale, the Ra is on the levels of the higher Madrigas of the Neshama, not on the Levushim level. By a Beinin, there's a possible Ra on the level of the Levushim, it's not actual Ra. By a Rasha, any actual Ra makes it into a Rasha, and a Rasha v'Tevle has Charata. Says Alter Rebbe as follows, that the Rasha v'Tevle is Umet Tzadik v'Rale. A Rasha to whom there is plenty of good, as you just mentioned, is the opposite of a Tzadik to whom there is also evil. Behind what this means, there is good in his divine soul, in his brain, and the right ventricle of his heart. But unfortunately, it's bent and secondary to the evil from klipa in the left ventricle of the heart. How much? Even a drop. If a ra is tev is bottled to cover to ra, even a drop, it's Rosh v'Tevle. What would that mean? Practical terms, even doing one Aveda. If you don't do any Avedas, you're called Beinani. It's kafaf only in possibility, it's not kafaf in actualization. A Rosh means even one Aveda, it's kafaf lepeil mamish to Ra. Says the Alter Rebbe, v'zemes chalagam ken liba v'esmadriges chalukas. And this also was divided up into myriads of different distinct levels. Be'inyan, in as much as kamus, how much evil the person has, ve'echos, and how severe the evil is of habitl or kfifas atev, of the nullification and bending of the good to evil, lera, to evil, chas v'shalom. And he explains, yes, some people, the amount of bending and subservience of good to evil is a tiny bit. The kfif of ralotev and pale is a drop. In other words, for small avedas, moreover, any bit to me, this doesn't happen constantly. Nor does it happen with regularity. On a regular basis. To me this means constantly. Tadir means on a regular basis, which is an interesting enlightenment into the halacha of Tadir and Tamid. And infrequently, that the evil overcomes the good. And conquers the small city, which is the body. In part, and in as much as the Toiv was conquered by the Ra, Rasha v'Tevle. Rasha means somebody that some of the good has been given to the evil. Right? Tzadik v'Rale means a tzaddik that he has evil in him. Rasha v'Tevle means some of the good has been given over to Ra because of a certain union of Leitev. Achlei kula, not in its entirety, ela miktasi levad, only in part. But I don't give myself completely away to Ra. I give away my etzem, my nefesh, I give away my pale, and a little bit. She has saw that one should turn the mashmate to the discipline and interest of the nefesh habahamis. And the Nefesh HaBahamis becomes a chariot and a garment for the godly soul. That the godly soul is manifest in now one of the three evil garments of the animal soul. Remember that according to Tanya, you have two sets of garments. Not just two sets of faculties, but two sets of garments. There's two sets of machshava, two sets of dibur, two sets of ma'aser. When you do a mitzvah using ma'aser nefesh halikis, you do an avei doing ma'aser nefesh habamis. When you do stam hazeh yifan elam hazeh, it's also nefesh habamis, and so forth. So rasha v'tev lei means that some of the tev is involved in the levushim of the nefesh habahamis. The hainu, this means oy b'ma'aser levad, either in action alone. Last is avedas akalas v'lei chamunas chas v'sham, even small avedas, and perhaps even the rabbanon avedas, and not severe ones, God forbid. Oy b'dibur levad, or perhaps only in speech. Ledaber avak lashon hara, to speak just the dust of lashon hara, which is a minig Yisrael, unfortunately, to speak about people. It's not even that lashon hara itself; it's avak stama. They're talking about people. V'lei chamunas chas v'shalom. I'm sorry, v'lei tzanis, and to speak cynicism or kagavna and so forth. Remember, we had this before. Dvarim betelim could be betelim beheter. But litzanis he can say shalosh kibbutz at meisagam. Oy b'machshava levad. We're in thought alone. Huri aveda, thoughts of aveda, hakosha mi aveda that are more severe than in aveda. Now you should know like this. There are three concepts in the issue of machshava. We're going to have it in Saf Perikid Beis, but I'll tell it to you right now. There are three concepts in the issue of machshava. Number one, the way a thought pops into your head from your subconscious. Number two, the way a thought pops into your head from your subconscious and you enjoy it and you continue thinking about it. It gives you pleasure to think about it. Number three, a thought pops into your head from your subconscious and you think to do it in pale. The first one doesn't make you a rasha. The first one you can't help. It's a hard, bad thoughts are going to pop into your head. The second and the third make you into a rasha. The third would called be machshava zara. Machshava zara means I'm thinking to do an aveda. The second would be called hirhuri aveda kosham aveda. It's not an aveda, it's just fantasizing and enjoying an aveda. You understand? So you have three levels. When the aveda pops into your head, that's called a hirur, which is not an aveda b'chal. When it pops into your head and you perpetuate it, that's an aveda, it's an aveda of machshava. When you think about doing it, practically that's called machshava zara. Zeh is mashma. The Hebrew word hirur and the Hebrew word machshava in Saf Perikid Beis.
Why is it worse than an actual aveda?
Because there's emotions in it. So even though it's not an aveda, but the emotion that comes with it drags you. It slaps you. It's plaguing you. It doesn't go away. Right, it goes more than one also. Even if you don't think about doing the actual aveda. But rather, you're thinking of fantasy, not even in the practical terms. You're not allowed to think in yonim that are raw. A person shouldn't think thoughts of taiva by day because it can bring Nachman to an aveda by night. So when it pops into your head, that's not an aveda. But when you perpetuate the aveda, page tezayin, like 7 lines in, it will be called hirur aveda. When you think to do it, it will be called machshava zara. This is how I understand the Tanya. Another example of machshava zaras. Time you to learn Teira. And you think, even not avedas, but stam azay levatol, stupid, useless things. It's written in Pirkei Avos. Haner balayla chulu. If you stay up at night, and you turn your hat to nothing, the Mishnah says it's terrible. Right? Because you think instead of thinking Teira, you think shtusim. So an aveda in machshava means either to waste your thoughts on nonsense or to think thoughts that you're not allowed to think. Shabachas mikol any of the above. In other words, you do a bad act, you say a bad word, you think a bad thought, who creates a bad and so forth. At that moment you're a rosh. Because at that moment, hatoiv shabai kafaf lera. That's what rasha means, you're evil. V'toiv loy, and your toiv is kafaf lera. And we only measure it in Peel Mamish. We don't measure it on the higher levels. We measure it only in your action. On the level of action you're giving into. That's called Rasha V'Tev Lei. Rasha ben Afsha gave away the evil in him is overpowering him. And is becoming a garment for the body. In other words, it's taking over the body. It is causing the person to sin. And it's contaminating the person. And of course, now goes the charata part. Now goes the regret part. Now goes the Jewish guilt part. Yes? And afterwards, I'll just interrupt here. I'll repeat it for the people who just arrived. That there's 2 rules to be a Rosh Hashanah. Number 1, you have to have Avedas. Number 2, you have to have Jewish guilt. If you have no Avedas, you're a Bein. If you have no Jewish guilt, you're a Rosh Hashanah. But Jewish guilt is inherent. To feel bad about what you do wrong. And afterwards, the good of the divine soul overpowers. And he has regret. And he asks forgiveness and atonement from the Rebbeinu. Hashem is going to forgive you for sure, like it says in the Gerz HaKedesh Perikid Aleph, Barucha im shav b'tshuva ru'uya, if you do the appropriate tshuva, al pi atzas chachamenu zachreinim levracha, based on the counsel given in the Gemara Masechta Yuma from Chachamim b'shleisha chalukei kapara, the 3 divisions of Kabbalah. In the Gemara Masechta Yuma it says arboa chalukei kapara hein. But the Alter Rebbe changes my arboa to shleisha, and you can look in the Kutei Sichos why. Shai Rabbi Shmuel, Deir Rabbi Shmuel would learn K'mach Kosav Makamachi. This is the beginning of the Gerz HaTshuva. Tanya b'Seif Masechta Yuma. Shleish Chaluk Kaporim Tshuva. That's how the Gerz HaTshuva begins. So K'mach Kosav Makamachi means the Gerz HaTshuva Perek Aleph. When a person doesn't have Aveda, they do Tshuva. Then it says Tshuva with Yom Kippur, and then Tshuva with Yisurim. V'yash, and there are people Misharach gave it by Yeser, that the evil is more dominant. And the evil becomes a garment, takes you over. Not either action or speech or thought, but all 3. And the person does even more severe Avedas. With greater regularity. but even such a person is still a Rosh Tevla. You know why? Because Beinatayim is charet. Because in the interim he has regret. Uboim leid he has thoughts of tshuva from the good in his spirit. That even if he's a person who does Avedas constantly, but from time to time he feels bad, he's still alive. He's a Rosh Tevla. He doesn't have sufficient power to conquer his evil, to say, you know what, I did Avedas yesterday, the famous Mendel Futafar story, and to stay away from sin altogether. Liyais made it to admit his mistakes, to abandon the Avedas altogether. If you do an Aveda and then you abandon your Avedas, so Kedem call you a Rosh Tevla B'dakas. Second of all, once you do Tshuva, you're about Tshuva. Like it says in Tanya Perek Yitzayin, become a Makemis. If you do Avedas with greater frequency, so then you can't really ever win. Aber von deswegen, you're a Rosh Tevla because you have Charot. You know what I meant? The foot of our story. It's a long story, but the Nekuda is that the two Chassidim with the Alter Rebbe. One, first was became a Chassid Alter Rebbe right away as a young man. The other became a Chassid many years later. So when they would Fabreng, they would talk. So one says to the next, what were you doing all those years as you were looking for the emes? He says, my whole life can be defined by 4 interpretations of Ashamnu. I used to say, Ashamnu, I sinned. Hashem doesn't mean I sinned. I know I'm a tzaddik. Ashamnu means he sinned. Then I got a little older, said, Ashamnu, I know I didn't sin, but maybe he didn't sin either. Ashamnu means bitmiyah. Who sinned? Nobody sinned. Then I started learning Musar, and I learned that Ashamnu means that I take Aichab Gitan Avedas. But I got to be realistic, right? I'm going to do it again. Can't help myself. What the Alter Rebbe is describing over here. When I came to the Alter Rebbe, I learned the 4th translation of Hashem. Ich hab gesindigt. Und ich will mehr nicht sindigen. I can actually stop myself from sinning again. Das ist Chassidus. They give a koyach, teach a person to be mizgaben alara. But even if one is not, he's still considered a Rosh Tevla because he has charota. This is what the Gemara says, the Rishoyim aleim charotis. A Rosh is full of regret, sheim reiva Rishoyim, which is the majority of the Rishoyim, because there is a conscious goodness remaining in their souls. This is the end of Rosh Tevla. He divided it into 2 categories basically. A person who does small Avedas very infrequently and then does Tshuva for them. And a person who's been, so to speak, conquered by evil, but he has charata, he has guilt, he feels bad, it bothers him. This is Rosh Tevla. What's Rosh Tevla? He's become stone. There's no regret. There's no conscious feelings of regret. He's so cold, he doesn't care at all. This is the Rasha that is evil to him. His good has become evil, right? It's as if his neshama has become a second nefesh Bahamas. You'll see momentarily that that's not true, but that's what it seems like. His good has become evil, so to speak. The evil in his spirit, all that remains in the revealed state within him. He's overpowered the good so much, it has departed. But not literally that the good has become evil. In a tzaddik v'tayv the evil has become good. In a Rosh Hashanah, the good hasn't become evil, but the good has lifted itself above. And remains in a state of makif. Makif means hidden. Says the Alter Rebbe Chiddush Nifla. Since even a Rosh Hashanah, he doesn't kill his toif, you know. He only works one way. You can kill the Yetzer Hara Harge B'tainas, but you can't kill the Yetzer Nefesh Alakis. Nava then it's there in Ifin of Makif. Therefh, Omar Azal, when the Gemara says, when 10 Jewish people cut together, the Shechina rests, and the Alter Rebbe discussed the Baruch and Perek Chav Gimel. You have Sakedish Chav Gimel, but here Kashashamaytim Yimeri, here from Rabbi Yosef and Mezitcha Magid, that if you have 10 Jews in a room, and a malach walks in, the malach people love Eima v'Fachad. The malach will be overwhelmed by awe and fear from the presence of the Shechina which is there. Chap the Alter Rebbe here in Chiddush Nifla. 10 Rishoyim Gemurim in a room who have no sentiments of Jewishness, no Jewish guilt whatsoever. A malach walks in and he's overwhelmed with pachad and eimah from the presence of the Shechina. Why? Because even at Rosh Gomor there is Nekudas Hayadus, B'chinas Makif, Rosh Hashanah, which means that the Toiv became Ra, is really not truly becoming Ra. It's still there, and over then it's Makif. And where do you see it? You get 10 Jews together, you have a minyan. No matter what they are. Like the Pilul Padach had 9 Yidden to a minyan, and they told him that it's a tailor, or it's a poet. It's a few stories. The guy was Nichaychas to anything. And the Bilal shut him to the minyan, and he was made him to tshuva. He said, how could you count me for a minyan? He said, yeah, you're a Yid, you have a Makif.